Hey everyone, Jake Newton with CPPS. Today's topic for this video is about insider threats and a little bit about developing a program for your organization. Insider threat seems to be a growing topic lately and a question that we're certainly getting more with some of our clients. And so we wanted to start sharing some information with you so you can start integrating the concepts within your day-to-day. So traditionally, if we start talking about definitions, not to exhaust definitions by any means, but it is important in this case. Traditionally, insider threats were typically defined to things like people who sold information. The concept or the mentality commonly went to things like espionage years ago, but the definition has really broadened and expanded in a lot of modern programs and the way it's being addressed. And so how it's commonly being defined now is include anyone with access or special knowledge of an organization and its assets, and then uses that knowledge or access to cause the organization or its people harm. So it's really expanded. So if you think about an example for that, it could be somebody that is a customer for a grocery store that ends up causing the grocery store harm, whether by sabotage or violence, whatever it might be. But traditionally, a customer could be seen for many intents and purposes as an outside kind of source. But now, in many programs, in many regards, they're widely becoming included under the insider threat moniker. So the definition's expanded considerably. So beyond that, there's also various ways and the methods that an insider threat can materialize, or the methods that they will carry out a threat or an attack, if you will. And so historically, like I mentioned earlier, espionage has been one of the front leading ways that these things have manifested. But now it's also including, for example, violence, whether it be workplace violence or violence against an organization's people, things like that. Sabotage is a big one for this. So think about destroying company property or organization property. Theft, financial theft, for example, but stealing assets from the organization. And then, of course, the other one here is cyber, where, whether it be phishing or malware, viruses, different ways to attack an organization by, information systems. So it's definitely a much broader definition. And includes much more things. And the reason why this progression has happened is because what we've noticed over the years is that the behavior of a person that ends up becoming a malicious insider threat, somebody that chooses to do this, usually doesn't do so impulsively. There's a progression there. And many times that progression has a lot of similarities in somebody that goes down what we call the pathway towards intended harm, or in the case of violence, for example, towards the pathway towards targeted violence. And so when we're talking about building a program around this, there's a couple different things that we're looking at. A lot of organizations will focus on the technical capabilities. For example, does somebody put a USB drive in a computer without authorization? And those things get triggered. But the other side that is getting a lot of traction, particularly recently, and even more so since the pandemic, is looking at behavior and establishing a means across the organization for employees or whoever to be aware of particular behavior of concern, and then acting upon that and ensuring that it doesn't progress to where harm can be accomplished. So what we know about insider threats is that they can be malicious, but they can also be unintentional. Somebody acts negligently, for example, or maybe they're just ignorant and they don't know the rules and accidentally, allowed the organization to be vulnerable because they didn't take the time to educate themselves or they weren't trained or whatever it might be. But there's various ways these can manifest. But ultimately what it comes down to when we're starting to build a program for insider threat, we want to establish, like many other respects, an organization that is built on trust, integrity, respect, and professionalism and establish clear policies and procedures that really codify that, so that when people start going outside of those boundaries, or when people start breaking those policies, if you will, then we have a basis to be able to formulate what kind of behavior we want within our organization. And then when we train people to what behavior we expect, and then when people deviate from that behavior, well, then we can do something about it. But we want to focus on the behavior because there is a behavioral aspect to insider threat. And that is something that anybody can observe when they're looking at their colleagues on their left and right. We can see somebody is becoming isolated. We can see when somebody might be coming in after hours or having certain shady behavior, whatever it might be. But this is what we want to take a look at, and this is how we can create an organization of awareness. Because one of the equations that we have at CPPS for a lot of these things is awareness plus action equals prevention. Awareness that this is a potential issue, taking action, whether it be reporting the issue or interceding with the individuals of concern, and developing intervention strategies to ensure that it doesn't progress, whatever it might be. But awareness plus appropriate action equals prevention. So that's a little bit of an insight into insider threat. We're going to have more content on this coming up in the weeks and months to come, but we wanted to start putting some education out there because there's two big components of this, and that's how we can really have an organization of awareness throughout an enterprise or a college, whatever it might be. So hopefully you find this useful, and we look forward to sharing more soon. Thanks.